Thanks for joining us here today. If this is your first time or you're returning to us, let me encourage you to go to jesusistherock.org. While you're there, give us an update on how God is working in your life. Now, if He's working life change through our ministries, let me encourage you to give to us financially on the website by clicking the giving button at the top right-hand corner of the screen. Thank you so very much for tuning in today, and welcome to Church 101.
I want us each this morning to look inside and say, how do I handle adversity? Some other words are misfortune. Misfortune, trouble, or affliction. That's how Webster defines it, is a time of trouble or affliction. Anybody here ever had to deal with adversity? Deal with trouble? Misfortune, things just happened that you had no idea. Affliction, you're afflicted with something. Some of you may be dealing with it right now. And the question is not, will you experience it? The question is, how will you handle it? How are you handling your trouble, your misfortune, right now? But we're going to look at two examples of adversity in the Bible, and we're going to see how they handled it. One group handled it very well. Another group, not so good. And so we're going to pick this first story up with the children of Israel, and we find them murmuring and complaining. Now imagine that, church folks murmuring. Isn't that a strange thought? Can you imagine church people complaining and griping? Who ever heard of such a thing as that? The very idea. I'm glad we don't have that problem. And the church said, oh me. They were murmuring about the food. They were murmuring about the water. They were murmuring about the living conditions. In essence, they were murmuring and complaining about the very provision that God had provided for them. That almost sticks in my throat as I say it. Complaining about the provision that God had provided for them. We wouldn't ever do that, would we? To be quite honest, God was getting pretty sick and tired of hearing it. I'll tell you something else that I believe to be true. I believe God still gets sick and tired of hearing it. Murmuring and complaining about the provision that He's provided us with. When we start murmuring about the preaching, or we start murmuring about the music, or we start murmuring about, the building is this, or we start murmuring about our jobs, complaining about our jobs, the way that God has chosen to provide for us. Or we murmur and complain about our home, or our automobile, or our family, our marriage, and our children. For God's sake, our children. And we're murmuring and complaining about the very thing that God has blessed us with. And I believe that it makes God sick to hear that. There is a side of God, church, that simply says enough is enough. And if you don't close your mouth, I'm going to close it for you. Don't believe it? Let's read. Numbers chapter 11. Let's see how God responded to their murmuring. Verse 1 says, the people soon began to murmur and complain to the Lord about their hardships. Now they've been slaves all their life, working from sun up to sundown every day, working in the heat, being whipped, being, tormented. They've prayed for freedom, and God sent Moses in and said, let my people go. And they're out of Egypt now, and they're free people. But how quickly we forget. Now they're praying about their hardships. And when the Lord heard them, His anger blazed against them. Fire from the Lord raged among them and destroyed the outskirts of the camp. The people screamed to Moses for help. And when he prayed to the Lord, the fire stopped. After that, the area was known as Tiberia, the place of burning, because fire from the Lord had burned among them. Now, when I read that, it's pretty clear to me that the reason for the fire was God was sick of the murmuring. God was sick and tired. It said His anger raged against them. And He was sick and tired of hearing His children gripe and complain about all the things that He had provided for them. It's clear to me that that's why the fire was sent. What's strange is it's not clear to them at all. They failed to see the connection. They just didn't get it, that the reason they were suffering with the fire was simply because God had had enough of their complaining and their murmuring and their griping and their backbiting. He was over it. Have you ever noticed how much harder it is to see the problem when you're the problem? You're looking and pointing and griping and murmuring, and everybody else sees it. Everybody else recognizes it, but you just don't get it because you're the problem. Remember David? And, we just talked about this story the other day, and I'm not going through it, but the sin with Bathsheba and all this thing, and Nathan comes to him, and he knows that David won't receive it if he says, hey, I know what you did. I know that you've slept with Bathsheba. I know that you had her husband killed. I know that. So he tells this little story, and David is, duh. I mean, anybody can see that story. Anybody can get that. I mean, he should have been halfway through the story, and David says, stop. I know where you're going with this. I could. But David goes through the story, and Nathan goes through the story, and David says, you kill that man. No need for a trial. Anybody that would take another man's sheep when he had all these sheep, and he took this poor man's sheep, and he's talking about Bathsheba. David's got all these women, all these wives, and he goes over and takes Uriah the Hittite's one wife and sleeps with her, and she becomes pregnant, and it's a messy story, and he has Uriah killed. Uriah's one of his own mighty men, and he has him killed. And David doesn't get it. So finally Nathan says, Pap, David, you are that man. That's you I'm talking about. And then David goes into his great prayer of repentance, and God in his mercy forgave him. But it's so hard for us to see when we're the problem. When the children of Israel, they didn't get it. They really didn't get it. And the reason we know this is because the moment the fire was out, they went right back to murmuring. Look at verse number 4. It says, then the foreign rabble, those who were not Jews, but other people that came in, who were traveling with the Israelites, began to crave the good things of Egypt. Crave the good things of Egypt? They were slaves. Don't we do that? Oh, I remember the good old times. Yeah, hanging out, we did this, we did. Really? You were lost, dying, and hell-bound, living under the curse of Satan, no victory in your life, no joy, no salvation, not having the power of the Holy Spirit and the love of Jesus flow, and you're looking back saying, oh, we craving that? That's what they did. They began to crave the good things of Egypt. And then the people of Israel also began to complain. Oh, for some meat, they exclaimed. We remember all the fish we used to eat for free in Egypt. For free? You were a slave. And yeah, they gave you some meat to keep you working, to keep you healthy, to keep you in bondage. They gave you meat. It says, we had all the cucumbers and melons and leeks and onions and garlic. Gosh, that ought to be punishment enough. But now our appetites are gone, and day after day, we have nothing to eat but this manna. So now we get down to it. Instead of saying, God, I thank you for this manna. God, I thank you for this provision. I don't even know what it is, but it comes down the mountains every night from heaven, and it lands on the ground, and every morning we walk out, and there it is, and we just gather our provision. You provided. I mean, it gives a new meaning to give us this day, our daily bread. Lord, you never fail. It's there every day. You provide us with this manna, this stuff that seems to come from nowhere. But it sustained us this long. It may not be just what we would like or prefer, but God, we're thankful for what we have. No, instead, we say we never get anything but this manna. Now, we, on the other hand, would know nothing about that. See, and we're always quick to give God thanks for all of his provisions. How large or how small, we never complain about what he's provided for us, do we? We don't ever complain about the weather he's given us. We don't ever complain about the temperature. You see, in all fairness to the children of Israel, this manna, we've taught a little bit on it before if you've been around for a while. The best word the English writers have been able to come up with for this word manna is whatness, or what is it? That's the way the word is translated. What is? Nobody knows what it is. You don't go plant it. You don't grow it. It just comes down from heaven. Nobody knows where it comes from. Nobody even knows what it is. I call it whatchamacallit. That's what I like. And it's not the candy bar. Anybody remember the candy bar, whatchamacallit? They still make whatchamacallits. That was a good candy bar. I'm sure it didn't taste like manna. But whatchamacallit, it was this stuff And it was probably not the most delicious thing they had ever eaten. I don't. But even if it was, even if it tasted like filet mignon, when that's all you have every day, 3 times a day or as often as you eat, you can sort of understand their discontentment. It's called adversity. It's a little bit understandable, because from time to time we all suffer some adversity. The question is, how do you handle it? Well, let's see how they handled it. Let's see how they handled the adversity. Verse 7 says, the manna looked and smelled like coriander seeds, pale yellow in color. The people gathered it from the ground and made flour by grinding it with hand mills or pounding it into mortars. Then they boiled it in a pot and made it into flat cakes. These cakes tasted like they had been cooked in olive oil. Yum. Yum, yum, yum. You got to give them credit for getting creative in how to fix this stuff. But I mean, there's not but so many ways you can fix manna. You make manna pancakes and manna biscuits and a manna sandwich and manna pudding, and you got this stuff, and you're trying to be creative as you can, but the bottom line is manna, and they were getting sick of it. But then they made the terrible mistake of moving off into fantasy land. Oh, for the days of Egypt. We had beans and garlic and fish, and we ate all this stuff freely. But see, they were forgetting that sometimes those things that are free cost you the most. How many know some gifts are too expensive to accept? I won't go there, but I want to. They forget that the price for free food was their freedom. It was their freedom. They were slaves in Egypt, and they prayed to get out of Egypt. They cried for deliverance, but now all they can remember is the fish and beans and cucumbers and melons. Sometimes we start fantasizing about the good old days, laying on mama's couch. I remember when I didn't have any bills, no house note, no family to take care of, just laying on mama's couch watching TV, no problem. We forget that when we were back on mama's couch, we were griping and complaining because we didn't have any freedom. Oh, for the days when I get out of here, I'll be on my own. Nobody telling me what to do. Nobody telling me what time I have to be in. And now we're on our own and free, and we're in bed by 8. It's a pits, ain't it, getting old? You got all your freedom, and now you don't want to do anything. Just go to bed. But we start fantasizing. We murmur. In the winter, it's too cold. In the summer, it's too hot. If the sun is shining, boy, we need rain. If it rains, boy, I'm tired of this rain. We need some sunshine. If the preacher's mature, he's too old. If he's young, he lacks wisdom. If he has a sense of humor, he's shallow. If he doesn't, he's stuffy. We murmur, we complain. Single people want to be married. Married people want to be single. Young people want to get old. Old people want to get young. There's no satisfying us. We murmur, we complain. And if we don't have something legitimate to complain about, we'll make something up. We'll create something to complain about. Look at verse 10. I want to read it out of the King James. It says, then Moses heard the people weep throughout their families, every man in the door of his tent, and the anger of the Lord was kindled greatly. Moses also was displeased. I guess he was. I come down here and brought you out of Egypt and all this, and now you're going to stand in the door of your tent. Notice nobody's come to Moses and said, hey, Moses, you think maybe we could pray to God and ask God for something, something different, or what can we do? Nobody's confronted the real problem. Everybody just stands in his tent door and murmurs. About the closest I can come today to standing in our tent door is the telephone, or Facebook, or Twitter, or whatever happens to be the latest and greatest social media these days. But that's how we murmur. Hey, Hezekiah, you sick of this manna as I am? Oh, yeah, man. I was just telling Nehemiah over there, this stuff is nasty. I am sick of eating this manna. And they murmur and they murmur. Have you ever noticed that murmur breeds murmuring? Yeah, look at verse number 4. He says, then the foreign rabble who were traveling with the Israelites began to crave the good things of Egypt, and the people of Israel also began to complain. It started out with just a few. Just a few, but then murmuring breeds murmuring. You get 1 or 2 people that has their nose out of joint, and instead of going to the source and dealing with the problem, they just stand in the tent door and murmur. They call somebody on the phone. They get on Facebook. They get here. You know what? I just don't know why so-and-so is doing that. If that was me, I would do this. And I don't know why. Did you know that so-and-so's doing this? And this one complains about that one, and that one complains about this one, and pretty soon the whole camp's in an uproar. Bible said a house divided against itself can't stand. Look at verse number 10. It says, Moses heard all the families standing in front of their tents, weeping, and the Lord became extremely angry, and Moses also was aggravated. You ever heard that old saying, be careful what you ask for, you just may get it? That's what's about to happen here. Let's skip down to verse 18. The Lord tells Moses, says, tell the people to purify themselves, for tomorrow they will have meat to eat. Tell them, the Lord has heard your whining and complaints. If only we had meat to eat. Surely we were better off in Egypt. Can you imagine what a slap in the face to God? We were better off in Egypt. Now the Lord will give you meat to eat, and you will have to eat it. And it won't be for just a day or 2 or 5 or 10 or 20. You will eat it for a whole month until you gag and are sick of it. For you have rejected the Lord who is here among you, and you have complained to him, why did we ever have to leave Egypt? What a slap in the face to God. Look at verse 31. Try to move along here a little bit. Verse 31. Now the Lord sent a wind that brought quail from the sea and let them fall into the camp and all around it for many miles in every direction. From the camp, there were quail flying about 3 feet above the ground. So the people went out and caught quail all that day and throughout the night and all the next day too. No one gathered less than 50 bushels. They spread the quail out all over the camp. But while they were still eating the meat, the anger of the Lord blazed against the people, and he caused a severe plague to break out among them. So that place was called something or another. And the graves, it meant the graves of craving, because they buried the people who had craved meat from Egypt. The graves of craving. Wow, I want to preach a sermon called The Graves of Craving. Murmuring and complaining always brings with it death and destruction, even if you just kill someone's spirit. You know, you ever seen a new convert? Someone that just comes to Christ and God rescues them out of Egypt, brings them out of the world and sets them, saves them, fills them with the Holy Spirit, and you see the joy of the Lord just flowing out of them. And then what happens? They come to church. And they begin to try to, seek fellowship from other people because I'm in. God has saved me and now I'm a part of you and I want to be. And they come in. What do they find? This one's griping about the music. That one's griping about the preacher. This one's talking about the person on the other side of the church. This guy's treating his wife like crap. This guy's this. And suddenly their spirits are just broken. This isn't what I thought it was. Maybe there's no difference here than Egypt. Maybe this is worse than Egypt. I believe that's what the Lord's talking about in Mark 9 when Jesus said it would be better that a millstone hung around your neck and cast into the sea than to face God in judgment when you've offended one of his little ones. The body of Christ, the place where they should come and say, this is everything I thought it would be and more. Oh, how these people love each other. That's what they said about the New Testament church. Even unbelievers said that. They looked at the church and said, oh, how they love each other. How they love each other. That was the one distinguishing mark. Jesus said, by this shall all men know you're my disciples, by your love one for another. How we doing? How we doing? Okay, second group. I got to get through here. It's hard. Exodus 17. Exodus 17, second group, dealing with adversity. While the people were, verse number 8, I'm sorry, Exodus 17, verse number 8. While the people of Israel were still at somewhere, the warriors of Amalek came to fight against them. Moses commanded Joshua, call the Israelites to arms and fight the army of Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand at the top of the hill with the staff of God in my hand. That's what Moses said. I'm going to stand on the mountain with the staff of God in my hand. So Joshua did what Moses commanded. He led his men out to fight the army of Amalek. Meanwhile, Moses, Aaron, and Hur went to the top of a nearby hill. As long as Moses held up the staff with his hands, the Israelites had the advantage. they were winning the war. But whenever he lowered his hands, the Amalekites gained the upper hand. Moses' arms finally became too tired to hold up the staff any longer. So Aaron and Hur found a stone to sit him on. Then they stood on each side, holding up his hands until sunset. As a result, Joshua and his troops were able to crush the army of Amalek. Wow, what a story. God gives Moses that staff, same one he used to hold up and part the Red Sea, same one he went in and showed to Pharaoh and did many mighty works with that staff. Till finally he said, let my people go. And Pharaoh said, go. The staff of God. That's what God gave him. That's what was in his hand. I want to preach a message called What's in Your Hand, but I can't. What's in your hand? God just put a staff in his hand, but when God puts it in your hand, whatever he's put in your hand, you can do what he called you to do. You can do mighty works with whatever's in your hand. One day I'll get there. But now he stands with a staff, and he notices that every time he holds the staff high, the Israelites win. But whenever you ever tried it? This thing isn't heavy. It's not hard to hold here, but let me stand here and hold it, and you come back at 6 tonight and see what I'm doing. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't have to be heavy, but we get weary. Everybody gets weary. And Moses would hold it up, but as he would drop his hands to get a little rest, the Israelites would begin to lose. They would begin to lose. And Aaron and Hur are watching this, and they're seeing a pattern. Get it back up, the Israelites win. Get it back down, and they begin to lose. In both situations here, the people were suffering adversity. Remember, misfortune, trouble, or affliction. In one situation, they were being attacked by an enemy at war. In the other situation, they were just hungry and tired of the same old food. But in both cases, they were suffering adversity. So which one was worse? Well, that's debatable. The truth is, the worst adversity is probably the one you're going through right now, right? That's our worst adversity. I mean, sometimes if we'll look around and you start comparing your adversity to other people's, you're not going through much. Somebody with real adversity says, oh, shut up. So your third car's broke down. Big deal, right? But our adversity is it's relevant. It's what we're going through right now. But in one case, you know, they're fighting the enemy. In the other case, really they're fighting themselves. How many know that the enemy on the inside can sometimes be worse than the enemy on the outside? When we're fighting the enemy in here, sometimes the worst enemy is the enemy within me. Yeah, the enemy within me. That's the worst enemy. In any case, in both situations, God was making provision. The manna, the whatchamacallit that comes down every day, the staff of God. God was making provision. It wasn't exactly like they wanted it, but it was provision. God may not always give you exactly what you want, but God will always provide what you need. Every time. Now, the difference that I want to show you in these two sides is how they each handled the adversity. Both had adversity, both had a problem, both had a bad situation, but how they handled the adversity would determine their destiny. How they handled the adversity would determine their destiny. The children of Israel in the wilderness, instead of being thankful for the provision that God had given them, they murmured and talked about Moses and criticized him and put him down and accused him of taking them out of Egypt just to let them die in the wilderness. As a result, God let them have their own way. He sent them meat, and they ate meat and ate meat and ate meat until they puked and died. They died in the wilderness. You say, why did they die? I don't know. Maybe they had done without it for so long, their systems just rejected it. Maybe the quail had some kind of disease, and maybe God had been providing them from it, keeping them from it, protecting them from it. And God said, fine, you want the stinking, nasty, disease-filled quail? Here they are. I don't know. But I do know that they ate it and ate it and ate it until they died. And I do know the anger of the Lord was against them. And I do know that when we stop trusting God and start trusting our own logic and begin murmuring and complaining instead of being thankful for God's provision, instead of being thankful for the church God has put us in, for being thankful for the spouse that God has given us, for being thankful for the home we have or the car we drive or the parents we have or the children we have, instead of being thankful, we murmur and complain. It usually ends up killing something inside of us and destroying those around us. On the other hand, Aaron and Hur had a problem also. They were at war. Again, God made provision. He gave Moses the rod and said, just hold it up there. That too was their provision. The problem was Moses got tired. The problem was Moses wasn't as strong as they would like for him to be. Moses wasn't as perfect as they would like for him to be. Maybe they felt he wasn't as anointed as they would like for him to be. He wasn't the leader they thought he should be. After all, God gave him the rod. All he has to do is hold it up. What's he got to do? How hard can this be? But he let us down. He's not strong enough. He's not good enough. He's not perfect enough. Yes, God has provided, but it's not what we want. He keeps dropping his arms. We need a real leader here. That's what we need. We need somebody that can hold that rod up. Never mind, Moses was the one God chose and called out of a burning bush and put the rod in his hand. Not somebody else, not a real leader, not a polished up, not a king, but Moses was the one that God's called. But they forgot about that. They forgot about that. How did Aaron and Hur handle it? Well, they didn't go to their tent door and start talking about how weak Moses was. They didn't get on Facebook and start talking about how disappointed they were with all the leadership and how disappointed they were in their husband and their wife and their kids. They didn't start murmuring and complaining about how if Moses would just pray more and be more spiritual, they could win this war. No, what they did was they got a rock and they set the man of God down on a rock and they said, "You rest. Now give us your hands." And they held up his hands and Israel won the war. Israel destroyed the Amalekites. How do you handle adversity? By murmuring and complaining, whispering and pouting, picking up your marbles and going home when things aren't just right? Or do you come along beside and say, "Hey, let me help you. What can I do to help you? Tell me what I can do. I want to hold your arms up. Let me help you." When's the last time you went to your spouse and said, "What can I do to help you? Tell me how I can be a better husband, a better wife"? When's the last time we went to our kids and said, "Tell me what I can do to help you? I'm praying for you. I'm trying to train you, but tell me, I want to hear your heart. What can I do to be a better dad, a better mom?" When's the last time you went to your parents, kids, and said, "Tell me what I can do to help you. Can I help around the house? Can I do something? Tell me what I can do to help this situation." One brings with it certain death. The other brings with it certain victory. That's the bottom line.
Again, we are incredibly glad that you joined us here today at Church on the Rock. We encourage you to go to the website. There you can find any of our archived podcasts. You can send us an email about how God's working in your life or a prayer request, or you can give to our ministries financially by clicking the Giving button at the top right-hand corner of the screen. Have a blessed day.